Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, I will explain the truth on why local multiplayer in Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is restricted to the Hyperbolic Time Chamber. In this detail, I will share my analysis and give some details from a game developer perspective on why the devs had to do this, and I will offer some solutions on how to fix it. This information could be useful to the developers if they were to see this video and get an outside perspective, or this information could be useful to modders. So if you are a modder and you see this video, it could probably help you in terms of when you mod the game to add the multiplayer back in, because I'm pretty confident modders will mod the game and add multiplayer back for all the other stages as well. So I'll first go over the information that we do know that the developers have given us. I will go over the information that we can see, and then I will explain the actual truth on why they cannot enable multiplayer local for all of the stages. So we're going to skip ahead to 451 in our timestamps here. And the developers have told us they wanted to show effects like the wind blasting around and the weather changing just by charging your ki. They want to take advantage of the power of the latest generation of consoles, and they want rocks and buildings being dynamically destroyed by the force of battle. So that's basically it. That was basically all they said about why they cannot have local multiplayer for all of the stages. We also have here at 456, you can see this is one of my favorite Dragon Ball characters. This is Goku Ultra Instinct fused with Piccolo. He's a really cool character, so I really like him. Let me know in the comments if you like Ultra Instinct Goku Piccolo or Gokulo. So at 508, the developers say that it's difficult to implement local split-screen multiplayer while retaining those core elements. And the core elements, they've said, are basically the weather and the terrain that will be destroyed. They also give some shockingly honest information here, it's really nice to see this. They developed the game with online multiplayer and offline single-player mode in mind. So they did not originally intend for the game to have local split screen multiplayer. It's great to see developers just say that it was not in their original scope. And the reason that they've added it is because they've responded to fan feedback, and fans are saying that they are disappointed there won't be split screen multiplayer. So I have respect for the developers for responding to that and finding some way to include local multiplayer. And hopefully, maybe if they see this video and they take some of these recommendations in mind, they might be able to add in a local multiplayer for the other stages as well. Lastly, the most important detail is that the local multiplayer will only be available in the Room of Spirit and Time, or the Hyperbolic Time Chamber. Those are the details that we have available. Hi there. I didn't realize I showed up here. I am Jerrel. I'm a normal human being, pretty normal. I make video games for a living. I make commercial games, and I also make homebrew games. So that's just stuff that I can do for free. It gives me a way to hang out with you guys. I can chat to you. We can hang out in live streams, and we can chuck your ideas in fun, free homebrew games, and I can share stuff with you. It's my way to thank you for being cool and hanging out and supporting my games. So I recently launched a game called Clashable. It's available on the Nintendo Switch eShop. It's an action puzzle game. Pretty fun. It's one of my smaller games. I have to alternate between creating and launching bigger games and smaller games because they're so time consuming and I have to earn money for my studio. So I've also done a free homebrew game. This is a full version of Clashable and it's free on the PS Vita. If your Vita is homebrew enabled, you can go ahead and grab that. I'll put the link in the description below. Now the reason why I'm telling you about these is because I recently ran a poll and I will be creating free fan games that are crossovers with my game Clashable, and people have voted for Dragon Ball. So this week I will be launching a free homebrew game that is a crossover between Dragon Ball and Clashable. I'm sorry, there's so many balls there, I got confused. So as you can see, I'm a huge Dragon Ball fan. I'm not a YouTuber, so I don't really understand how to be entertaining and whatnot on the camera. So I thought it'd be a good idea if I got the Dragon Ball headband. I know that people like costumes in YouTube videos. So if I got the Dragon Ball headband, I thought maybe it would be entertaining. I know that people love the whole thing. My favorite move is the Makanko Sapo no Jutsu. Boom. Really cool. So if you guys have any cool cosplay ideas, you can let me know about that. So anyway, that's me. I'm going to instantly transmission out of here and we'll get back to the video. Okay, so now I'm going to share some facts that are the actual truth. First, let me tell you what is not affected by the game having split screen. At 524, we have this nice big environment. There's a lot of geometry here. There's a lot of details. At this point in technology, having split screen is not affected by a lot of geometry like that, by having a big environment. If this was on the Nintendo Switch, it would be a different story because the Switch is not as strong as the other consoles, but because this is coming to PC and the other very strong platforms, this is negligible, having to have the split screen. And the reason why is when you have split screen, the game has to draw everything twice, or the hardware has to draw everything twice. That means it is drawing the characters twice, it is drawing the backgrounds, all of the effects, it's drawing it twice. That means that the hardware has to do double the work. So the more complexity you have on screen, the harder it is for the game to render, which means that the game will slow down and there will be significant performance implications. But again, because this is being made for modern consoles that are very powerful, and for the Switch, having a large environment like that is not affected by split screen. That has nothing to do with it. Next, we have the statement about the weather and the lighting in the sky. So let's look at 450 here. Having a cool detailed skybox like this, having weather and whatnot, that is not affected by having split screen. Again, having to draw all of that stuff twice, that does not really have an effect at all on the performance of the game. And then if we look at 454, we'll see that there are trees and all of that destructible terrain and all of that. Having to draw all of that twice because of split screen, that does not affect performance. That's so negligible, it doesn't even matter. So those are the things that don't matter. And then also we have physics simulations. So here we see Ultra Instinct Goku Low, and he breaks this building and there are some physics simulations. It does have to calculate, how they drop. I'm not sure if there's going to be collisions with the terrain. Most likely not. Most likely they'll fall through. But those kinds of physics simulations are not affected by rendering the screen twice with split screen. So those are the things that are not affected by split screen. So it was a little bit just simplifying and marketing speak to tell people that. I wouldn't say they were lying or being dishonest. They're just simplifying it. But I will explain now what is affected by split screen. So transparent geometry, such as particle effects, clouds, anything like that, that stuff is very expensive to render. And so if we have a look at 454, 455, if you pause it at pretty much any point, not only do you have these what look to be keyframe hand-drawn animated particles, which those aren't necessarily transparent, but we do have a lot of particles that are transparent. Those are all pretty expensive, and the more space that they fill up on the screen, they do get increasingly more expensive. Also, whatever technique they're using to render water, believe it or not, is pretty expensive to render because it has to take into account all sorts of different reflections. It's calculating lighting, there's transparency, it has to express a sense of depth underneath the water. So water is actually pretty expensive to render, even on very good hardware. We have what appears to be volumetric lighting. Volumetric lighting is a technique used by game developers to simulate a sense of atmospheric density. And that means that the farther you get from the camera, the light, it's simulated the effect of light bouncing off of moisture particles or any pollutants in the air, anything like that. It creates a haziness and it helps scenes look realistic and visually extremely pleasant. It's very common, tons and tons of games use it more and more, but it is pretty expensive, and the more complexity you have with that, the more expensive it becomes. more obvious in an angle like that, but there is a chance that this isn't true volumetric lighting, that it is just distance calculated fog. And distance-based fog is something that we've had in games for decades. It's significantly cheaper to render, but there is still a cost with distance fog. There are some shots in the city that sort of convince me that it could be true volumetric fog, but this footage moves a little too fast. I don't really get a good enough look, and there's way too many particle effects. It's so flashy. It's really hard for me to tell if it's true volumetric fog. I'd be willing to guess, because it's Unreal, that they are using true volumetric fog. But if you have a look at a scene like this, all those particle effects when you hit terrain and the rocks explode, there's so many particle effects that having to render that twice would cause a significant moment of slowdown, or a moment of significant slowdown, especially when blowing up buildings and all that. They all add up. The characters' particle effects, they all add up. And the effect that we see when blowing up terrain is not insignificant. It is huge, the effects that they show. What is also very expensive are post-processing effects. And I see multiple kinds of post-processing effects used in this. Those can be anything from bloom. It can affect the way that the characters are shaded with their lighting and their expression of highlights, their rim lighting. All of that could come down to post-processing effects. Anything in the lighting. There could be all sorts of things that are so subtle you don't realize. Whoa! Goku, Vegeta did a dick punch so hard it went through Goku just there for a second. Okay, things like this, and I really like this effect, sort of impact frames where the screen goes black for a second. If we can, let's get Goku's, see if we can pause it at the right time. Things like this, where the character, you know, they sort of disappear. You see their outline, and then the screen goes dark. You get these sort of effects. All those kinds of post-screen processing do have an impact. It all adds up. You only have a limited budget for rendering. Things like that where the screen goes black. Those are post-screen effects. And when you combine that with all the other aspects of having to render in the environment, then it causes significant slowdown. So by removing the environment, it means that you don't get all of the particle effects from the explosions. It's really, in my opinion, they've overdone the particle effects. It's way too much. Just the attacks themselves have a little bit too much. It is toned down a bit from what I've seen in earlier trailers and earlier footage. It looks cool, but it's style over substance, and because they've overdone the particle effects, it's resulted in having to restrict multiplayer to this. This doesn't look like volumetric lighting to me. This looks more like distance-based fog, which is, again, it's cheaper to render. And again, one more final detail here is there can be multiple sources of light. Often when you see when characters are charging up attacks or they're firing off attacks, they are emitting light. So you see the light on the environment here. What is kind of expensive is having multiple sources of light depending on the rendering method that the developers have used. And if they've used a certain rendering method, every source of light that touches another object, that affects another object, means that object is rendered another time. So let's just say that they're using forward rendering here. So not only are these terrain objects affected by the global lighting, they are also affected by Vegeta's light here, which means that if you were to put this in split screen, it's rendered once for the global lighting, twice for Vegeta's lighting, and then you add in split screen, and now it has to render 4 times. You can see this can all add up very quickly. So that is the truth. They've overdone the particle effects, and that is the real truth as to why we don't get multiplayer in all of the stages. Some potential solutions would be to dial down the particle effects overall, just globally reduce the amount of particle effects that they are using. If they don't want to affect the attacks, then reduce the particle effects that they use on the terrain, because it's massive. Like all of that is too much. We'll go back again. If you reduce the particle effects as a result of destroying the terrain, it would reduce that load. What you can also do for all of the post-processing effects, reduce the rendering resolution of the post-processing effects. That's something maybe the development team doesn't have an understanding, or they don't have experience doing that. it would be beneficial to get someone on the development team who can do that. It's not that difficult to do for an experienced developer. So again, you need to reduce the internal rendering resolution of your post-processing effects, things like your volumetric lighting, your bloom. If you don't want to reduce the quality of the visuals overall for single player, then have it to where the game knows that it is in multiplayer, in local split screen, and then have it dynamically reduce the resolution of the rendering effects. You can lower the rendering resolution of the game overall. You can also reduce the there's extra unneeded particle effects. That there's so much going on, they all contribute to performance implications. Just check for multiplayer, local, split screen, and if the game can see that, then it can use less particle effects that are coming off. It's not difficult to do. It does take some manual work, but it's not difficult to do. And those would be my recommendations. If there's any quality settings that you can reduce in terms of the shaders, I would certainly consider those. I would investigate those options. But certainly there isn't anything here in this room that would put a huge load on the graphics processing. The only rendering budget would be on the particle effects, basically, because these characters, they're not going to be expensive to render. So that would be my recommendations on improving that. So hopefully this video has been interesting to you guys. Hopefully it's useful to somebody. If the developers won't make use of it, then certainly I hope the modders will. All right, it's great to see you guys. Take care. I'm working on some other videos as well. And then again, please check out my fan game for Dragon Ball. It's a crossover. It's going to be free homebrew. You'll be able to play it on the computer, and I'll put it on the Vita as well. A huge thanks to my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much. It really means a lot to me that you support me as a developer, and it does make a big difference that you guys contribute. It really helps me keep the studio running, and when I have a month of good sales, it means that I can spend time working on free homebrew games for you guys. So Patreon supporters will have access to my Dragon Ball fan game that I'm working on this week, so they'll be able to play that early. I'll put some development builds up. You guys can play that. And I'll have more cool bonuses for you guys coming up very soon. So please take care of yourselves. I'm working on my next game as well. And obviously I'm a huge fan. I know that the headband is from Naruto, not Dragon Ball. Just thought I'd have a laugh. Take care everyone, be well. I'll see you in the next video.